You know what time it is. Whoa! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Uh oh. Hold on. I messed up. There we go. All right, we're back. Technical difficulties. Had to check in with my friend before we got started. Oh my goodness, this is a little loud. Hold on. Hold on. All right, y'all. Hopefully we are doing great. Hair is looking fabulous. Shout out to my stylist, Copy Select, and she is amazing. I'm gonna try to get the right angles. I want to have my bookshelf in the background because my my books are magical. They deserve some spotlight. Actually, they deserve all the spotlight. I'm just here to read them. There we go. I think that's good. Yeah, that's perfect. Hi, y'all. We are back again with Storytime with Chris with Lloyd Alexander's The Book of Three. So, start up my tea. Ah, like I always say, you do not have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, spare time, in between time, nap time, worky time, relax time, whenever you have time. And please do check out the YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe. It's a good time. I don't do this for profit. This is just a fun passion project I have for the love of literature. Reading is not just fundamental, it is essential. It is important because it teaches us different goals, different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, different faux pas and whatnot. Ooh, that was hot. Like ASMR for reading. I don't know. Yes. Oh. And like I said, I do not own the music that you are listening to in the background, but we are back. We are back with the book of three. We are on chapter 16. We do not have that much left, actually, because there are only 20 chapters, I think, in this book. Oh. There is nothing that will ever stop me from loving turning the page of a book. I mean, digital copies are cool, but I hope that I do not wake up in a world one day where we don't have physical copies of books. I love having a book. Even if we have to use recycled materials, as long as I have a physical copy of a book, I don't have a problem. So, we don't unnecessarily cut down the trees. Not unnecessarily. Get that right, Archimedes. Ouch. My, one of my locks was caught in my robe. Chapter 16. Taran turned accusingly to King Idoleg. You said nothing of Henwin. You didn't ask me, said Idoleg. That's sharp practice, Fluter muttered, even for a king. It's worse than a lie, Taran said angrily. You'd have let us go our way, and we'd never have known what happened to her. You should be ashamed of yourself, Ilarway put in, shaking her finger at the king, who appeared most embarrassed at being found out. It's like looking the other way when someone's about to walk into a hole. Finders keepers, the dwarf king snapped. A troop of the fair folk came on her near the Avron banks. She was running through a ravine. And I'll tell you something you don't know. Half a dozen warriors were after her, the henchmen of the Horned King. The troop took care of those warriors, and we have our own ways of dealing with you clumsy lummoxes. And they brought your pig here, underground, most of the way. No wonder Gwydion could find no tracks, Taran murmured to himself. The fair folk rescued her, Idleleg angrily continued, turning bright red. And there's another fine example. Do I get a word of thanks? Naturally, not. But I do get called disagreeable names and have nasty thoughts thrown at me. Oh, I can see it in your faces. Idleleg is a thief. Idleleg is a wretch. That's what you're saying to yourselves. Well, just for that, you shan't have her back. And you'll stay here, all of you, until I feel like letting you go. Ludwig gasped with indignation. If you do that, she cried, you are a thief and a wretch. You gave me your word. The fair folk don't go back on their word. There was no mention of a pig, no mention at all. Idleleg clapped his hands over his paunch and snapped his mouth shut. No, Tarn said, there was not. But there is a question of honesty and honor. Idleleg blinked and looked sideways. He took out his orange kerchief and mopped his brow again. Honor, he murmured. Yes, I was afraid you'd come to that. True, the fair folk never break their word. Well, he sighed, that's the price for being open-hearted and generous. So be it. You shall have your pig. We shall need weapons to replace those we lost, Tarn said. What? Screamed Idleleg. Are you trying to ruin me? And crutchings and mansions, piped Gertie. Tarn nodded. Provisions as well. This is going too far, Idleleg shouted. You're bleeding me to death. Weapons, food, pigs. And we beg for a guide who will show us the way to Cardathel. At this, Idleleg nearly exploded. When finally he calmed himself, he nodded reluctantly. I shall led you Dolly, he said. He is the only one I can spare. He clapped his hands and gave orders to the armed dwarfs and turned to the companions. Off with you now before I change my mind. Alanwe stepped quickly to the throne, bent and kissed Idleleg on the top of the head. Thank you, she whispered. You're a perfectly lovely king. Out, out! The dwarf cried. As the stone door closed behind him, Taran saw King Idleleg fondling his head and beaming happily. Like the princess. The troop of fair folk led the company down the bolted corridors. Taran, at first, imagined Idleleg's realm to be no more than a maze of underground galleries. To his astonishment, the corridors soon broadened into wide avenues. In the great domes far overhead, gems glittered as bright as sunshine. There was no grass, but deep carpets of green lichen stretched out like meadows. There were blue lakes glistening as much as the jewels above, and cottages and small farmhouses. It was difficult for Taran and his companions to realize they were underground. I've been thinking, whispered Fluter, that it might be wiser to leave Hedwig here until we can, return to her. I thought of that too, answered Tarn. It's not that I don't trust Idleleg to keep his word, most of the time, but I'm not sure we should take another chance in that lake, and I doubt we could find another way into his kingdom. He certainly won't make it easy for us to come back, I'm afraid. No, we must take Hedwig while we have the chance. Once she's with me again, I won't let her out of my sight. Suddenly the fair folk halted in one of the cottages, and from a needed carpeted pen, Tarn heard a loud "Youch!" He raced to the sty. Hedwig was standing with her front feet on the rails, grunting at the top of her voice. One of the fair folk opened the gate, and the white pig burst out wriggling and squealing. Taran threw his arms around Hedwig's neck. "Oh, Hen!" he cried. "Even Medwin thought you were dead." "Wee, wee!" Hedwig chuckled joyfully. Okay, that is my impersonation of a pig, and it is quite goofy, so bear with me. Hedwig chuckled joyfully. Her beady eyes sparkled. With her great pink snout, she rooted affectionately under Tarn's chin and came close to knocking him down. She looks like a wonderful pig, Ilanwe said, scratching Hedwig behind the ears. It's always nice to see two friends meet again. It's like waking up with the sun shining. She's certainly a great deal of pig, agreed the bard, though very handsome, I must say. And clever, noble, brave, wise Gurgi found her, said Gurgi. Have no fear, Tarn said with a smile to Gurgi. There's no chance we'll forget it. Rolling and waddling on short legs, Henwin followed Tarn happily, while the fair folk proceeded across the fields to where a stark figure waited. The captain of the troop announced that this was Dolly, the guide Idleleg had promised. Dolly, short and stubby, almost as broad as he was tall, wore a rust-colored leather jacket and stout knee-high boots. Goodness, caught a tickle. Hi. Thank you for watching. Hi, Matt. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Brandon. Ooh, all right. A round cap covered his head, but not enough to conceal a fringe of flaming red hair. An axe and short sword hung from his belt, and over his shoulder he wore the stubby bow of the fair folk warrior. Taran bowed politely. The dwarf stared at him with a pair of bright red eyes and snorted. Then, to Taran's surprise, Dolly took a deep breath and held it until his face turned scarlet, and he looked about to burst. After a few moments, the dwarf puffed out his cheeks and snorted again. "What's the trouble?" asked Taran.
You can still see me, can't you?
Dolly burst out angrily. "Of course I can see you," Taran frowned. "Why shouldn't I?" Dolly gave him a scornful look and did not answer. Two of the fair folk led up Melangar. King Idoleg, Taran saw with relief, was as good as his word. The saddlebags plunged with provisions, and the white mare also carried a number of spears, bows, and arrows, short and heavy, as were all the weapons of the fair folk, but carefully and sturdily crafted. Without another word, Dolly beckoned them to follow him across the meadow. Grumbling and muttering to himself, the dwarf led them to what seemed to be the sheer face of a cliff. Only after he had reached it did Taran see long flights of steps carved into the living rock. Dolly jerked his head toward the stairway and began to climb. This passageway of the fair folk was steeper than any of the mountains they had crossed. Melangar strained forward, wheezing and gasping. Hedwig pulled herself up each step. The stairway turned and twisted. At one point, darkness was such that the companions lost sight of each other. After a time, the steps broke off, and the group trod a narrow pathway of hard-packed stones. Sheets of white light rippled ahead, and the travelers found themselves behind a high waterfall. One after the other, they left the glistening rocks, splashed through a foaming stream, and at last emerged into the cool air of the hills. Dolly squinted up at the sky.
Not much daylight left,
He muttered more gruffly than Idleleg himself.
Don't think I'm going to walk my legs off all night either. Didn't ask for this work. Got picked for it, guiding a crew of what? An assistant pig keeper, a yellow-headed idiot with a harp, a girl with a sword, a shaggy what's-it, not to mention the livestock. All you can do and hope for is you don't run into a real war band. They'd do for you, they would. That's not one of you looks as if he could handle a blade. Humph!
This was the most Dolly had spoken since they had left Idleleg's realm, and despite the dwarf's uncomplimentary opinions, and there's nothing wrong with having an opinion, just don't be hateful about it. Don't be mean about it. It's okay to have an opinion. Just don't be ugly about it. It's not nice. Just try your best not to do it. Taran hoped he would finally come around to being civil. Dolly, however, had said all he intended to say for a while later. When Taran ventured to speak to him, the dwarf turned angrily away and started holding his breath again. "For goodness sakes," Ludwig cried, "I wish you'd stop that. It makes me feel as if I'd drunk too much water just watching you."
It still doesn't work,
Dolly growled. "Whatever are you trying to do?" Taran asked. Even Hedwig stared curiously at the dwarf.
What does it look like? Dolly answered. I'm trying to make myself invisible.
"That's an odd thing to attempt," remarked Fluter.
I'm supposed to be invisible, snapped Dolly. My whole family can do it just like that, like blowing out a candle. But not me. No wonder they all laugh at me. No wonder Idlex sends me out with a pack of fools. If there's anything nasty or disagreeable to be done, it's always, find good old Dolly. If there's gems to be cut, or blades to be decorated, or arrows to be footed, that's the job for good old Dolly.
The dwarf held his breath again. Kind of like that. Ooh, that was uncomfortable. Ooh, ouch. Kids, don't do it. Mm-mm. Ooh, not feel good. The dwarf held his breath again, this time so long that his face turned blue and his ears trembled. "I think you're getting it now," said the bard with an encouraging smile. "I can't see you at all." No sooner had his remarks passed his lips than a harp string snapped in two. Fluter looked sorrowfully at the instrument. "Blast the thing," he muttered. "I knew I was exaggerating somewhat. I only did it to make him feel better. He actually did seem to be fading a bit around the edges." "If I could carve gems and do all those other things," Tarn remarked sympathetically to Dolly, I wouldn't mind not being invisible. All I know is vegetables and horseshoes. Not too much else about that either. It's silly, Ilanway added, to worry because you can't do something you simply can't do. That's worse than trying to make yourself taller by standing on your head. None of these well-intentioned remarks cheered the dwarf, who strode angrily ahead, swinging his axe side to side. Despite his bad temper, Dolly was an excellent guide. Tarn realized. Most of the time, the dwarf said little beyond his usual grunts and snorts, making no attempt to explain the path he followed or to suggest how long it would take the companions to reach Cardathel. Tarn, nevertheless, had learned a great deal of woodcraft, had tracking during his journey, and he was aware the companions had begun turning westward to descend the hills. They had, during the afternoon, covered more ground than Tarn thought possible. He knew it was thanks to Dolly's expert guidance. When he congratulated the dwarf, Dolly answered only, "Humph!" held his breath. They camped that night on the sheltered slope of the last barrier of mountains. Gurgi, whom Taran had taught to build a fire, was delighted to be useful. Cheerfully gathered twigs, dug a cooking pit, and to the surprise of all, distributed the provisions equally without saving out a private share for his own crunchings and munchings later on. Dolly refused to do anything whatsoever. He took his own food from a large leather wallet hanging at his side and sat on a rock. Chewing glumly, he snorted with annoyance between every mouthful and occasionally held his breath. "Keep at it, old boy," called Fluter. "Another try might do it. Your outline looks definitely blurred." "Oh, hush," Ilanwe told the bard. "Don't encourage him, or he'll decide to hold his breath forever." Just lending support," explained the crestfallen bard. "A Flam never gives up, and I don't see why a dwarf should." Henwin had not left Tarn's side all day. Now, as he spread his cloak on the ground, the white pig grunted with pleasure, waddling over and hunkered down beside him. Her crinkled ears relaxed. She thrust her snout comfortably against Tarn's shoulder and chuckled contentedly, a blissful smile on her face. Soon the whole weight of her hand pressed on him, soon the whole weight of her head. Pigs don't have hands. They have hooves. They don't have hands. Making it impossible for Tard to roll onto his side. Henwin snored luxuriously, and Tard resigned himself to sleeping, despite the assortment of whistles and groans directly below his ear. "I'm glad to see you, Hen," he said. "Glad you're glad to see me. But I wish you wouldn't be so loud about it." Next morning, they turned their backs on the Eagle Mountains, began heading for what Tarn hoped would be Cardath. As the trees rose more densely around them, Tarn turned for a last glimpse of the eagle itself, tall and serene in the distance. He was grateful their path had not led them over it, but in his heart he had hoped one day to return and climb its towers of sun-flecked ice and black stone. Until this journey, he had never seen mountains. Now he understood why Gwydion had spoke longingly of Caerdathel. His thought led Tarn to wonder again what else Gwydion had expected to learn from Henwin. They halted. He spoke to Fluter about it. "There might be someone in Cardatha who can understand her," Taran said. "But if we could only get her to prophesy now, she might tell us something important." The bard agreed. However, as Taran had pointed out, they had no letter sticks. "I could try a new spell," offered Ilanwe. "Okrin taught me some others, but I don't know if they'd be any use. They haven't anything to do with oracular pigs. I do know a wonderful one for summoning toads. Okrin was about to teach me the spell for opening locks, but I don't suppose I'll ever learn it now. Even so, locks haven't much to do with pigs either." Ilanwe knelt beside Henwin and whispered rapidly. Henwin seemed to listen politely for a while, grinning broadly, wheezing and snuffling. She gave no sign of understanding a word of what the girl was saying. At last, with a joyful "Hooray!" she broke away and ran to Tarn, wriggling gleefully. "It's no use," Tarn said. "There's no sense in losing time. I hope they have letter sticks in Caerdathel, though I doubt it. Whatever Dalvin has, it seems to be the only one of its kind in all Verdane." They resumed their march. Gurgi, now official cook and fire-maker, strode boldly behind the dwarf. Dolly led the companions through a clearing and past a line of alders. A few moments later, the dwarf halted and cocked his head. Taran heard the sound too, a faint, high-pitched screaming. It seemed to come from a twisted thorn bush. Drawing his sword, Taran passed the dwarf. At first he could see nothing in the dark tangle. He drew closer, stopped abruptly. It was a Gwithaith. And that is where we will end for today. Now, if you all have been watching these videos, you will know in the early parts of this story that the Gwithaiths they were they were formerly good creatures, but they were twisted and mangled into evil bird-like creatures by the Horned King. And so now they found one of these predatory birds and whatnot. So we're gonna see what happens next for next time. But like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your leaning time, in between time, relaxing time, nap time, work time, chillaxing time. But as always, I love you all so very much. I'll see you later. Bye bye now.